The morning Gordon Hale walked into his boardroom, he had exactly 5 minutes before the first candidate was scheduled to arrive. He wasn't in a generous mood. He hadn't slept well. The kind of sleeplessness that has nothing to do with noise or discomfort, but everything to do with a hollow feeling that follows a man home from the cemetery. 3 days earlier, he'd stood at his mother's grave in the November rain and said the things people say when there's no one left to hear them. His assistant, Margot, had arranged the interviews herself, administrative director. The position had been empty for 2 months, and the applications had piled up the way things pile up when a company is quietly grieving alongside its founder. Gordon hadn't pushed. He'd let Margot handle it, let the world keep spinning, while he tried to remember what forward motion felt like. The boardroom smelled like fresh coffee and wood polish. Someone had placed a small vase of white chrysanthemums in the center of the table. Gordon looked at them for a moment, then looked away. 5 candidates. Margot had narrowed it down herself. He trusted her judgment almost completely. He sat down, opened the first folder, and read. The knock came before he expected it. "Come in," he said without looking up. The door opened. He heard footsteps. Light ones, the kind that hesitate in a doorway, and when he finally raised his eyes, he stopped. Standing just inside the boardroom was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 11 years old. She wore a dark navy dress that was slightly too long for her, the hem brushing her knees, and she carried a school backpack over one shoulder, the kind with a broken zipper on the front pocket, repaired with a safety pin. Her hair was in 2 braids, still neat from the morning, and she was looking directly at him with an expression that was neither frightened nor confident, but something rarer than both, composed. In her hands she held a folder, a manila envelope, slightly wrinkled at the corners, held closed with a rubber band. "Hello," he said carefully. "Hello?" she said. "My name is Violet. I'm here for the interview." He blinked. The interview? For the administrative director position. She took 1 step closer, not quite to the table. "My mother prepared everything. I have her resume, her references, and a letter she wrote last night explaining her experience with project coordination and records management." Gordon had sat across from city councilors, bank executives, and once, famously, a premier who'd arrived 20 minutes late and expected an apology. He had not, in 31 years of running Hale Resource Partners, sat across from a child in navy dress holding her mother's resume. "Where is your mother?" he said. Violet's expression shifted. Barely, just at the corners of her eyes. "She's at St. Michael's, the hospital. She went in this morning. This morning, she collapsed at work." The girl said it the way children say terrible things when they've had enough time to accept them, flatly, without drama, but with a kind of weight underneath that no amount of composure could quite press down. "She works early shifts at the bakery on Roncesvalles. The manager called me at 7. My aunt took me to the hospital and then my aunt had to go to her own job, so She stopped, swallowed once. "I took the streetcar." Gordon was quiet for a moment. "You took the streetcar," he said. "From St. Michael's. To here it's only 3 stops." She set the folder on the table, gently, carefully, like it was something that mattered. "My mom said this was the most important interview she'd ever had. She prepared for 2 weeks. She even borrowed a blazer from Mrs. Fielding next door." Violet looked at him. "I didn't want it to be wasted." Gordon looked at the folder. He looked at the girl. He reached over and picked up the folder. Inside was a resume, 4 pages, single-spaced, meticulously formatted. Denise Ashmore. 17 years of administrative experience across 3 provinces. A letter of reference from a former operations manager in Calgary. Another from a school board in Winnipeg. A third that was handwritten on notepaper with a small blue flower printed in the corner, from someone named Sister Margaret at St. Anne's Community Center on Queen Street West. The cover letter was the last thing in the folder. It was typed, but at the bottom, in handwriting that slanted slightly to the right, someone had written, "I hope to have the chance to show you, in person, what I can do." Gordon set the folder down on the table. "Violet," he said, "would you like to sit down?" She sat. She placed her backpack carefully at her feet, kept her back straight, and folded her hands in her lap. She looked like someone who had been told, at some point and firmly, that posture mattered. "Your mother, Denise?" "Yes. How long has she been at the bakery?" 4 years, Violet considered. "And she cleans offices on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. and on weekends she does bookkeeping for 2 small businesses on Dundas, cash work. She said the last part plainly, without embarrassment. She's very good with numbers. She used to manage payroll for a construction company in Edmonton. That's in the resume. I saw that, Gordon said. He had seen it. The construction company entry was one of 3 positions where Denise Ashmore had been promoted within the first 18 months. He'd also noticed the 7-year gap in the middle of the resume, the kind of gap that either means hardship or something a person isn't ready to explain in a cover letter. Can I ask you something? Gordon said. Violet nodded. The gap between 2014 and 2021. Do you know what happened there? She was quiet for just a moment. That's when my dad got sick, she said. And then after he died, we moved. A lot. Mom had to take whatever work was available. She looked at the folder, then back at him. She told me not to mention that in the interview, but she told you about it. She tells me most things. Something shifted in Violet's expression, not quite a smile, but something close to it. Something that looked like pride. She says I'm old enough to understand how life works. She says that's more important than being sheltered from it. Gordon was quiet. He thought of his own mother, who had worked the front desk of a dry cleaning business for 19 years and had once told him, when he was not much older than Violet, that dignity was the one thing no employer could give you and no circumstance could take away. He hadn't thought of that in a long time. Is your mother going to be all right? He said. The doctor said it was exhaustion, Violet said, and something with her heart. They're still doing tests, but he said she needs to rest for at least a week. She looked down at her hands. She's going to be upset that she missed this. I imagine she is. She really wanted this job. Violet looked up. She looked it up online. She said your company is stable, that the work is meaningful, and that the benefits include extended health coverage. A pause. That last part. She said that was the most important thing. Gordon didn't say anything for a moment. Extended health coverage. He thought about what it must cost to be Denise Moore. To work 3 jobs and still look up a company's benefits package before an interview. To prepare for 2 weeks, borrow a blazer, type a cover letter with a handwritten note at the bottom, and then collapse at 5 in the morning before any of it could matter. Violet, he said, did you eat breakfast this morning? She hesitated, just half a second, but he caught it. I had something at the hospital. What did you have? A granola bar from the vending machine. Another small pause. And water. Gordon stood up. He walked to the door and opened it. Margot, he said into the hallway. His assistant appeared from around the corner. Mr. Hale, can you have something brought in? Eggs, toast, whatever the kitchen can manage quickly, and orange juice. He glanced back at Violet. Do you have any allergies? Violet looked startled. No allergies, he told Margot. Thank you. He came back to the table and sat down across from her again. Violet was looking at him with an expression he recognized, the expression of someone who is not accustomed to being considered and doesn't quite know what to do with it. You don't have to feed me, she said quietly. I know I don't, he said. I'm going to anyway. While they waited, he asked her questions, not about her mother's qualifications, but about other things. What grade she was in, what she liked at school, whether she'd been to the AGO because it was free on Wednesdays, and whether she knew that. She hadn't known that. She wrote it down in a small notebook she pulled from her backpack, the kind of notebook with a spiral at the top and a cat on the cover. She wrote things down carefully, the way someone does when they've learned that information has value and storage is unreliable. She told him she liked math and geography. She told him she was learning to bake from her mother on Sunday mornings. She told him she wanted to be a structural engineer when she grew up, because she'd seen a documentary about the Confederation Bridge and had thought it was the most impressive thing she'd ever seen. She said this without self-consciousness, the way children state ambitions before they've learned to be ashamed of wanting things. The food arrived. Margot set it on the table without comment. Eggs, wheat toast, a small pot of jam, and a glass of orange juice. Violet thanked her. Margot smiled, and Gordon noticed that Margot's eyes were slightly brighter than usual. Eat, he said, and Violet ate. He looked again at the resume while she did. He read the letter from Sister Margaret, which described Denise Ashmore as the most reliable and quietly capable person I have encountered in 20 years of community work. He read the reference from the operations manager in Calgary, which was 3 paragraphs long, and ended with the sentence, "If I could hire her back tomorrow, I would." He set the folder down and looked at Violet, who was carefully spreading jam on her second piece of toast. "Tell me something," he said. "When your mother talks about work, the right kind of work, what does she say she wants?" Violet looked up. She thought about it genuinely, the way children think when they're not performing for an adult, but actually trying to answer. "She says she wants to feel like what she does matters," Violet said. "Not just the money. She says money is what lets you keep going, but feeling like your work counts, that's what makes you want to." She set down the knife. "She also says she wants to stop being tired all the time." Gordon was quiet. "She's tired a lot," he said. "Every night," Violet said. "She falls asleep on the couch before I've finished my homework. I cover her with the blanket from the bedroom." She said this without self-pity, just reporting, the way someone reports weather. "She always apologizes in the morning. I tell her not to." The boardroom was very quiet. Outside the window, Toronto was doing what Toronto does in November, going gray and purposeful, people moving through it with their shoulders up and their eyes forward. Gordon had grown up here, had made his money here, had buried his mother here 3 days ago, and had somehow, in the middle of all of that, forgotten what the city actually contained. People like Denise Ashmore, people who fell asleep on couches because they'd used every last thing they had. He thought about the other 4 folders on the table. He hadn't opened them. He thought about something his mother used to say, "Gordon, the obvious thing and the right thing are not always the same. But sometimes they are, and that's when you can't afford to look away." He picked up Denise Ashmore's folder again and set it on top of the other 4. "Violet," he said, "I'd like to call your mother." She looked up quickly. "She's not supposed to have her phone on in the ward, I know. I mean, I'd like to speak to the nursing station, find out where she is, how she's doing. Would that be all right with you?" Something moved across Violet's face, a kind of careful hope, the kind that has been disappointed before and has learned to move slowly. "Yes," she said, "that would be all right." He made the call himself from the boardroom phone while Violet sat across from him and finished her orange juice. He spoke to a nurse named Patricia. Efficient, precise. The kind of voice that belongs to someone who has given difficult news enough times to have learned kindness through repetition. Denise Ashmore, she told him, was resting. The cardiac panel had come back clear of anything serious. It was, as the doctor had initially suspected, a combination of severe exhaustion and low iron, the kind of thing that builds quietly for months and then arrives all at once. She would likely be discharged in 2 to 3 days. She would need rest. Real rest. He thanked the nurse, hung up, and looked at Violet. "She's okay," he said. "They think she'll be out in a few days. Her heart is fine." Violet breathed out very slowly. She looked at the table, then at the window, then back at him. Her eyes were dry, but only just. She was scared, Violet said quietly, when the ambulance came. She kept saying she was sorry, to the paramedics, like it was their time she was wasting. A pause. "She apologizes for too many things." "Some people do," Gordon said gently. He thought about the things he'd apologized for in his life, and the things he hadn't. He thought about the year after his company had its first profitable quarter, when he'd meant to call his mother more and hadn't, and how by the time he'd thought to correct it there was less time than he'd imagined. "Violet," he said, "I'm going to be honest with you, because I think you're someone who can handle honesty." She looked at him squarely. "Okay, I haven't interviewed the other 4 candidates yet, and I'm not going to pretend that reading a resume across from the applicant's daughter is a standard hiring process." He paused. "But I have read your mother's file very carefully, and I'd like to offer her a formal interview, a real one, when she's well for this position." Violet was very still. "With pay starting from now?" she said carefully. He blinked. "I'm sorry," my aunt said when I was leaving the hospital. She said the thing to ask, if I got to talk to someone important, was whether they'd pay from the date they decided, not the date she starts. Violet held his gaze steady as a compass needle. She said most companies won't, but some will if you ask. Gordon stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was the first time in 3 days that his face had done that without effort. "Your aunt," he said, "sounds like someone worth listening to." "She's very practical," Violet agreed. "Tell her," Gordon said, "that we would be willing to discuss a start date that accounts for the unusual circumstances of today's meeting. and that your mother should bring her references in hard copy, not just in the envelope you carried. Violet opened her cat notebook and wrote that down word for word. He called for a car, his own driver, Bertrand, and arranged for Violet to be taken back to St. Michael's. While they waited, he asked Margot to have a room service order sent to room 412. Soup, bread, fruit, the kind of food that is both easy and nourishing, the kind his own mother had always called getting well food. He didn't say whose room it was. Margot didn't ask. At the door, Violet turned. She'd put her backpack on, both straps this time, and she was holding the empty manila folder against her chest. Denise's resume was back inside it, carefully replaced, the rubber band re-secured. "Mr. Hale," she said. "Yes, thank you for reading it." She looked at him. "She worked really hard on it." "I know," he said. "I could tell." She nodded once, the way someone nods when they've been taken seriously, and walked down the hallway to the elevator. Gordon stood at the door for a moment after she was gone. The boardroom was behind him, the 4 unopened folders still on the table, the white chrysanthemums still in the vase. He thought about how some mornings begin with 5 minutes and a closed folder and the absolute certainty that you know what the next hour will bring. He thought about his mother. He picked up the phone and called Margot back in. "The other 4 candidates," he said. "Please call and reschedule for next week. With apologies for the short notice." "Of course. Shall I give a reason?" He thought about Violet on the streetcar. 3 stops alone, carrying her mother's whole prepared future in a slightly wrinkled envelope. "Tell them something came up," he said. "Something important." He took Denise Ashmore's folder back to his desk. He read it again, the whole thing, slowly this time, not as a candidate to be assessed, but as a story to be understood. 17 years of work, across 3 provinces, interrupted by grief and displacement and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up on paper. A woman who borrowed a blazer, who handwrote a note at the bottom of her own cover letter, who had, somehow, raised a daughter who sat across from a stranger in a boardroom and asked, calmly, directly, and without apology, whether he would pay from the date he decided. He reached the last page and found something he'd missed the first time, a small sticky note, pressed to the back of the reference letter from Sister Margaret. In the same slightly right-slanting handwriting from the cover letter, it read, "Violet, if something goes wrong and I can't make it, don't be afraid. Just be polite, be honest. And remember that people are mostly good if you give them the chance to be." Gordon read it twice. He set it down on the desk. He sat there for a while, in the quiet of his office, with the city moving past his window and the folder open in front of him, and the faint smell of coffee that had gone cold. Then he picked up the phone and called St. Michael's again. Not the nursing station this time, but the main switchboard. "I'd like to send flowers to a patient," he said. "Room 412. The name is Ashmore." "Of course. What would you like the card to say?" Gordon thought for a moment. He thought about Violet's notebook, her straight posture, her careful handwriting. He thought about soup and getting well food and a sticky note that was never meant for him. "Put this," he said. "Your daughter came. She did everything right. Rest well, and when you're ready, we'd like to meet you properly. G.H." He hung up. Outside, the November sky had shifted. Not brighter, exactly, but different. The kind of different that happens when a cloud moves, or when you've been looking at the same gray long enough that any change starts to feel like light. Gordon Hale was not a sentimental man. He would have told you that himself, without hesitation. But he sat at his desk that afternoon and did not open the other 4 folders. He made 2 phone calls, answered 6 emails, and spent the rest of the hour doing something he hadn't done in months. He sat quietly, and he thought about what his mother had said about dignity, and the obvious thing, and the right thing. And when Margot knocked at 3:30 to ask if he needed anything, he said no, thank you, he was all right. And for the first time in 3 days, it was true.